long-term FMBR member, and he will introduce our superb panelists. And our moderator is Bill Virga, and Bill is, in addition to being FMBR member, is transpersonal counselor, psychotherapist, certified hypnotherapist, and does a fantastic job with regard to all the things that we asked of Bill. So let me turn this over to Bill.
Okay, so okay, good. A few things come to mind. I had a few notes here, and of course I misplaced them, so I'll just have to do it by memory. But people always ask, Jerry alluded to it, but people always ask, well, how much is it anyway? Don't you pay to go into FMBR? Yes, you do. You pay $15 for each meeting, $5 if you're a student. And what I tell people is, when Jerry was saying it's a great deal for that membership, it's $50. And it covers all the speakers, and sometimes it's more than just once a month. We get some speakers who come in intermittently. We have a summer picnic and a Christmas dinner. And it's held at Judy's house, which is just a gorgeous home, and people get to meet each other. And really, FMBR is, for me, more than just a great scientific organization bringing in speakers to develop a higher state of consciousness. It's about all the people who keep returning and coming back and start forming a community. So with that said, another thing that people ask me a lot about is they said they'll get jazzed up, particularly about the kind of panel we have here tonight, which you're all going to see in a little bit as it unfolds. They'll come up and say, wow, you know, that was really interesting. Too bad there's not other places around like this. Well, there are. And after 21 years in this research, and I live it, breathe it, and eat it, it has become my path. I always say my goal is to raise my own consciousness as high as possible and assist others to do the same. And that's why I'm involved at FMBR. So I want John Spar to stand up, because about 15 minutes down the road off of 85 is St. Andrew. There's John. So if anybody has a question afterwards, John's the director of South Bay International Association of Near-Death Studies, okay? And that's at St. Andrew's Church, right across the street from West Valley College. And there's actually quite a few people in here from South Bay Ions. And we don't just only have, I'm kind of his assistant director over there, we don't just have near-death experiencers there. Again, we have other topics that are related. Also in the area, people will say things to me like, well, if I don't see you, who else do you recommend as a therapist? Because I'm having these strange experiences, or I'm having these spiritual experiences I can't explain and don't know how to deal with. So in San Jose is OPUS, Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. Okay? The contact person there would be June Steiner, for those of you who are interested. Her phone number is 408 area code 395-9202. Now, back in the day, I was there. They meet every other Sunday. I was there twice a month religiously. We have a little technical difficulty here. Okay, and they go from 1 to 5. And the average group there could be 8 people, it could be 15, it could be 16, 17, depending. But again, that 4 hours under those topics and those conditions seems like sometimes it goes by in 45 minutes. And it's free. It's another thing. People are always asking about, well, where can I go where they don't charge or something? Because not everybody even has 50 bucks. I think I just went out. So I can project my voice. No problem. So another group that has just started up, and I facilitated their near-death panel. Okay, thanks, Jerry. I facilitated their near-death panel last October. It's called ASSIST, okay? The American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. The contact person there is Yolaine Stout. 2 years ago, when Mary and I got coordinated along with FMBR, the near-death panel here, Yolaine was on it, okay? And she's a doll. She's former Northern California head of the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So you can look that up on the web. And the last group I'd like to mention, and we had them come in here, and that is the IAC. And Mary and I both, and Jerry also, and a few others, got involved with them last year. Luis Monero spoke here. So that stands for the International Academy of Consciousness. And this group has originated in Brazil. It's kind of the South American version of the Monroe Institute. So you have Robert Monroe here in the United States. At the same time, down in South America, you have Waldo Vieira, who is an MD. And what I love about that group is the teachers, the instructors, are all near-death experiencers. They're all volunteers. So when people are worrying, again, where's this money go? All they're getting is their flight paid for and their hotel. So they all have day jobs. So my purpose in looking at these different groups is to see how can I connect the dots and how can we integrate them to better serve all of us. Okay, so that covers that. Getting to tonight's panel. I'm thrilled because I know all three women on it. And instead of introducing everybody, I'm just going to tell a quick little story about how I met each person. And when I joined FMBR in 1998, I felt like I wanted to see FMBR move into the direction of looking at the near-death phenomena, looking at the UFO phenomena on a scientific level, looking at the out-of-body phenomena. And back in those days, Bill Goff was running the show, and they had the summer picnic. Let's see, I'm 57 now, so I was 43 at the time, which was quite young at that time. And he said, all right, some of you younger people, I want you to voice yourself. Raise your hand. Say what you want to hear and see it here. And I remember saying exactly what I told you. I want to see us move to this other level. And he said, okay, well, we'll take that into consideration. Yeah, you know, it's a little far out, but we'll consider it. And then when I sat back down and after that was over, this woman came up to me and she said, you and I need to talk. And I said, we do? And she said, yeah. And he said, well, who are you? And she said, my name's Nadia McCaffrey, and I'm a 2-time near-death experiencer, and I have been wanting to hear somebody say something like this. So Nadia's right here. And I jokingly say, I don't facilitate a near-death panel unless Nadia's on it. And you'll find out why after she has an opportunity to talk tonight. So then, about 2 years went by, and I'm in downtown Los Altos, and I have a window cleaning business too. 30 years plus as a window cleaner, 15 as a therapist. So I'm cleaning some windows in a place called Cook's Junction, and I see this flyer. And the flyer has this ball of light woman on it with this long gray hair and big smile. And it says, come to the Town Crier newspaper Friday night and see PMH Atwater present. Research on over 2,000 near-death experiencers. And I said, wow, I haven't heard of her. I'm going to go. And PMH is sitting right here now. And today her body of evidence is more like 3,000, 4,000, okay.
Wow.
So, and then I came back home and, well, I'll say a little more about PMH. So I walked in and she looked at me, and there were just about a dozen of us in the room at the time, and she said, hey, what are you doing? Come up here, in her direct way. And she said, tell me about yourself. So I started telling her, I've interviewed about, I don't know, 35 to 40 near-death experiencers now. And she said, oh, great, so sit down. And our relationship began. And I came home, and I called up Nadia, and I said, Nadia, so guess what? I met this phenomenal researcher today, yesterday, PMH Atwater, have you ever heard of her? I said, of course, you and I are good friends. So about 5 years ago, I was looking through the East-West Guide, and I see Sharon Lund. And Sharon Lund's documentary, Dying to Live. And I came a few minutes late, and I'm always running late, and I see this wonderful presentation by this lovely woman, and I'm just kind of mesmerized by all the things she went through. And then I asked her, I walked up and I introduced myself and I said, hey, can I give you my card and take one of yours? And she said, of course. And I said, now, we may not talk for 6 months, but you and I are connected. So believe me, I will be contacting you again. And so a year ago, John says to me, I need a speaker. Have anybody in mind? And I called Sharon up and she said, I'd be glad to do it. And Sharon's here. So the only person I didn't know was Alan Hugenot. And I asked Mary, well, what do you know about him? And she said, not a heck of a lot, but he seems like a really nice guy, and you know, he's a guy like you. He wants the brass tacks. He wants to go with the data and take a look at how do we prove this, what do we look at, who are these skeptics, how do we deal with these skeptics, how do we prove that there's a science behind this. So I called Alan up last weekend. He had to go to the theater, but we talked for about 40 minutes before he left. And tonight, I sat right next to him at dinner, and we just talked back and forth whenever we could. And all I can say is I'm so glad that Mary and I just didn't go with 3, that we brought Alan in, not just because he's a man, but because of the kind of man he is. So I'm going to stop and turn it over to Sharon. Each presenter will get half an hour. We're going to try and keep it at that so that we can get to a break. We'll have a break of about 10 minutes or so, 15, to go to the bathroom, have a cookie, whatever. Come right back so that all of you can ask those questions. And I'm encouraging you that if the question is there, please ask it, because you're never going to have a better now to ask it to. Thanks.
Good evening. Can you all hear me? My name is Sharon Lund, and I'm very honored to be here. I want to thank all of you for being here, for your interest, and I want to thank Bill for bringing me here, and also for Mary. My life has always been about dancing with life and death. Would you guys rather me stand up? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes. The hands.
Yeah, that's great.
Now give back. Is this a no? Testing. Okay. So I've always danced with life and death. As a child, I was sexually abused for 9 years by my grandfather. And every time he abused me, I actually had a blessing, because as I was being sexually abused, an angel came to me, and her name was Laura. And I could see her, yet I could see through her. And she had long blonde hair and crystal blue eyes. And Laura took me out of my body so I wouldn't feel the pain of being sexually abused. And she taught me how to communicate with the animals, and she taught me how to communicate with the flowers. And she told me that we're all connected and that there's no separation. So there was a real gift in being sexually abused. But I was sexually abused for 12 years. Wow. And I didn't tell my mom and dad, because my grandfather said, if you tell them, I will kill your mom. So I held on to that. And I just stuffed the emotions in my body. My little brother Raymond, he was 6 years younger than I was, and he had convulsions. Probably every other month he was having convulsions and in and out of the hospital. So there's death around that area. And then to me, death was always a sacred thing. I never feared it, because I felt that it was around me. And where do I go with this? Where am I? I'm sorry. Okay, so as a child, I knew that we were all connected. I knew the energy between one another. I knew the energy between the plant kingdom. I knew the energy between the animals. And I felt this deep connection. And I ended up getting married, and after being married, I had not been sexual before we got married, the night we got married. And because I had not experienced that and I'd not healed myself, we got divorced shortly after that. But I ended up having a daughter, Janine, and she's my blessing, and you'll see her on a video a little bit later. So when I was 21, my brother, my dear, dear brother, Tommy, he was the closest friend I had. He died when he was 23 and I was 21. He was in a motorcycle accident and a drunk driver killed him. And a part of me actually died. It completely died. But the great thing that came from that is for 18 years, my brother Tommy came to me. He came in visitations. He'd come to me and I could see him physically. I could see through him and he would talk. And it'd also come in my dream state. So there was a real world gift to that. And then after 18 years, he said, Sharon, I can't come to you anymore because if I keep coming to you, you won't find love. You'll keep holding on to me. And he stopped coming to me, and I felt devastated that he was not, because he was around like every other month he was coming to me for the 18 years. And my little brother, Raymond, at the age of him being 23, 6 years away from my other brother, Tommy, he died. He died of a heroin overdose. So death was part of my life, and I embraced it, and I understood it. But yet, it didn't really hit me until years later. Back in 1984, I started working in the AIDS community up in Los Angeles. And what I did is I actually taught gay men mind, body, spirit techniques. I taught them visualization, meditation, how to listen to their body, muscle testing, all these different modalities to heal the mind, body, spirit. And I really, truly enjoyed working in the AIDS community. And these gay men were so loving and they're so compassionate. Here they had their family completely discriminated against them, and society discriminating against them and shutting them out. And yet their hearts were so full of love and so full of understanding. And I felt like the AIDS community was part of my family. And my mom and dad were living in Hawaii, and they did not like the idea that I was working in the AIDS community. They didn't understand how the virus was transmitted. They were afraid that if these gay men touched me, that I'd become infected. They were afraid if they drank out of my glass of water, I would become infected. They didn't understand how the virus was transmitted. And I wanted to educate them. And December 1986, my parents came over to Los Angeles, and they said that they wanted to show me the very first Dan Rather's AIDS special on AIDS. Well, I thought I was going to educate them on AIDS, but within 3 minutes of watching that video, my ex-husband Bill, of my second marriage, was on the video saying he was dying of AIDS. I screamed, I threw something, and I called Bill, and Bill said, no, it was not him. And what I heard in meditation was, yes, it was him, and I needed to be tested. And I'll never forget, back in the 80s, this is 1986 now, back in that time, there was a lot of anonymous test sites that were available. But at that time, it took 3 months to get in because there were so many gay men getting tested. And I'll never forget, after my blood was drawn, I came back 2 weeks later, and I picked 2 numbers and 2 letters, and I'll never forget, they're A, B, and 1 and 2. And they called me in, okay, A, B, 1, 2, come on in, here I am. And I'm standing there, and Gary, the doctor, he was looking down at the floor, and then he looked up at me, and he actually had tears in his eyes, and he says, Sharon, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're infected. And I just went numb. I didn't feel anything, I just went numb. And I could see him talking, I could hear him, but nothing was registering in my mind. And he handed me a whole bunch of pamphlets of gay-related support groups like Louise Hay's group, Hayride, which I ended up going to. And all these gay community things that I knew about because I was working in the AIDS community. And he handed them to me, and I went out to the car, and I put them in the glove compartment. And I said, I'm not going to tell my mom and dad, and I'm not going to tell my daughter, because if they hear that I'm infected, they're going to see it as a death sentence. And I did not want that energy in my body. I didn't want their emotions to affect me in any way. So I just stayed silent with that. And about 2 years later, I came down with symptoms, drenching night sweats, chronic fatigue, diarrhea. And at that point, I had to tell my mom and dad. And I ended up becoming anorexic because of Bill, my second husband. Bill was Prince Charming. He was just like the perfect gentleman before I married him. And Bill said that, you know, we made an agreement that we would not have sex until we got married. My kind of guy. I didn't like sex anyhow. So this is like really, really good. So the night of our wedding, he became very abusive to me, and on the way to the wedding, we were getting married at the 50-yard line of the Rose Bowl because he was the manager of the Rose Bowl Stadium. And so we're getting married on the 50-yard line, and as we're driving to the Rose Bowl, he says, you know, I don't know why I'm marrying you. You're ugly, you're fat, you'll never amount to anything, you're stupid. And I'd never seen this side of him before. And my daughter was in the back seat, and his 3 kids were in the back seat. And Janine was crying, my daughter, and I started crying. And then he just, all hell broke loose because I started crying. And so I tried to contain myself. And as I'm walking out to the 50-yard line, I'm actually saying, God, what am I supposed to do? Tell me. It was like 1,000 voices shouted out, don't marry him! Seriously. So here I am on the 50-yard line. I do. So I married Bill, and he was very abusive that night. It was December, and there was a Christmas celebration, and all the high school kids were in their Christmas gowns and stuff. And I was in my wedding gown. And we went upstairs, and he said he was going to take a shower, and I said I was going to take a shower after. And I came out, and he was sleeping, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and I said, Bill? And he ignored me, and I said, Bill? And I kissed him, and he jumped up, and he says, and I had a really nice, I figured this was the first time we were going to make love, and so I had a really nice, sexy lingerie thing that went down. It was really, I felt really, really sexy in it. And he looked at me, and he says, you know, you look like a tramp. Are you a whore? And he said, get the hell out of here. So I got out of I went into the bathroom and got dressed, and I went down to the lobby area. And then about 2 hours later, I came back upstairs, and he wouldn't answer the door. And then about an hour later, he finally answered the door, and I says, Bill, we need to talk. And he says, no, there's nothing to talk about. And then the next morning, I said, we need to talk about this. And he said, no, there's really nothing to talk about. And then we went back home to my daughter and to his kids, and it was just like nothing was wrong. I mean, he wasn't close to me at all, but I had to like actually walk on eggshells and walk around the side of the walls almost because I was terribly afraid of him. And Bill became more and more abusive to me, and after 6 months I got annulment from being married to him, which I was really grateful for. But what I saw from that, and what I didn't know at that time, was that the reason he wanted to be close to me. He said in court that he wanted to marry me to get custody of his kids. But he knew at that time he was infected, and he didn't want to tell me, or he didn't know how to tell me. And that's why he kept pushing me away and being mean to me. And, you know, he wanted his kids, but he didn't want anything to do with me. Bill died in 1987, and his other wife also died in 1987. And Bill called me probably about 2 weeks before he died, and I was on the East Coast presenting, and he called and said, he says, Sharon, I need to talk to you immediately. And I didn't get that message. You know, we didn't have texting, we didn't have the phones like we do now. And I didn't get the message till I got home, and I called, and he had already died. And I know in my heart, when I went into meditation, I know that in my heart that he was calling to tell me the truth and to ask for forgiveness. And I have totally forgiven him, because I know that if we don't forgive one another, that energy is just trapped in our body, and that's going to make us sicker and sicker. So my life completely changed, and I became anorectic, and I was in the hospital, actually tried to commit suicide. First I took a bottle of pills and threw them up immediately, and I couldn't take care of my daughter. She was 9 years old at the time, and I sent her to Hawaii to live with my parents. And then a couple days later, after taking the pills, I got a razor and I put it on my left wrist. And I leaned against the bathtub, and I said to God, I said, please forgive me, but if there's something I need to do or know before I kill myself, let me know right now. Immediately, the entire bathroom, the whole room, became brilliant bright light, brighter than we've ever seen on this earth plane. And all of a sudden, I became calm. And I felt this deep inner peace within me, and I felt this extreme love within me. And I heard, my child, it's not your time to die. Get yourself in the hospital, and when you get out, you will become a healer, you'll teach around the world, and you'll write books. None of that made sense to me because I wasn't doing any of that. But within 1 year, I started traveling around the world. I started traveling throughout the United States and into Canada and Russia and Japan and Europe, teaching about AIDS and mind, body, spirit healing modalities. And then I started doing healing also. So I figured that this was, you know, I really did receive my life's purpose at that time. And I saw the gift in it. And when I was in the hospital with anorexia, 2 spirit beings came to me, and I could see one of them. His name is Scimitar. He's about 4'9", and he was Japanese, and he had a long beard, and he had a staff. And he said he was here to teach me Eastern philosophy and Eastern ways of healing. So he actually, I felt, guided me into acupuncture and more into the meditation and into the Eastern philosophy, into helping me heal my body even more and helping me to become more whole and one within myself. And then the other person was Viracocha, or Viracocha, in Peru it's pronounced Viracocha. And Viracocha said that he was like my master teacher. So I had these guides with me, and I felt really blessed that I had all this knowledge that was coming to me. And in 1999, I went to Peru, and at that time, Scimitar said, okay, I've taught you all you need to know. Now it's time for you to release me, and it's time for me to release you. It's time for you to get a new guide. And for about 6 months, I was devastated because I had such a close connection to Scimitar, and I could hear him and I could see him. And it was like a best friend had left me. And he said, somebody will come to you soon. And within about 4 months after I got home, Annika came to me. And Annika said, I'm going to help you write your books. And Annika, what I ended up doing is writing my first book, Sacred Living, Sacred Dying, A Guide to Embracing Life and Death. And what I heard was, before I started writing it, I felt that my life was, Mary's holding it up back there. So I felt that my life was really about serving God. It's, you know, how do you want to use me? What do you want me to do? And what I was told is, go back to the beginning, go back to the AIDS community. Remember how you helped men to create their legacy, how you helped them to create a memorial that really represented their life story. That people didn't mourn it, but they celebrated their life story. So that's how Sacred Living, Sacred Dying came about. In 1996, actually 95, I was told, Viracocha said, you need to move away from Los Angeles. And he says, you need to move to the Red Rocks. And I knew I'd be divinely guided where that Red Rocks were going to be, and it was actually in Utah, in Kayenta, which is outside of St. George. And if any of you have been to that area, it's just the most magnificent red rocks I've ever seen. So I got into St. George, and I was told not to work in the AIDS community, to just mellow out and have fun and be out in nature. And within a matter of 6 months, I came down with PCP, pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, which is the #1 leading cause of death with people with AIDS. And then I came down with MAI, which is a macrobacteria. And, excuse me, MAI is basically is a wasting thing. I got down to about 86 pounds, diarrhea day in and day out, and high fevers of like over 103, and then chills as cold as ice. It was the worst experience I ever had. And I got really angry at Viracocha. And I got really angry at God, and I turned my back away, and I said, you told me to come to the Red Rocks for healing, and now here I am. I'm in the hospital, and I'm dying. What is going on? And my daughter and my mom saw how I was turning away, and how I had left Viracocha, and how I wasn't doing my meditation and not staying positive anymore. And after about 4 months, I started getting more active and started meditating again. What I would like to do is take a moment, and I have an excerpt from my documentary. It won second place in the Honolulu International Film Festival, and it's just a little bit about my near-death experience. Just a second, Sherry. So I knew that after being in the hospital a year and a half, I knew I was going to die. I was surrendering. The quality of life was no longer there. The quantity of life I could care less about. All I knew is that I needed to hold my daughter one more time. That's the only thing I needed to do, and then I was ready to release this body and go wherever I needed to go. So Jerry's going to show you just about a 6-minute, 7-minute portion of this movie.
The main message I'd like to share about Advocacy is that millions of people we know around the world, men, women, and children, just like you, have had near-death experiences.
This is from Sharon's documentary, Dying to Live.
Okay.
Is that when a person dies, they're immediately healed. There's a sense of peace within them and tranquility. That there is a great
raise the volume.
He's got this in this reason. I'm trying to get this, make sure this is on.
The main message I'd like to share about dying and death is that millions of people we know around the world, men, women, and children, just like you and me, have had near-death experiences. And what we know and what our messages are to
What's on pause, Jerry?
is that when a person dies,
It's fine, Jared, it's good.
Okay, then move.
right, they're immediately healed. There's a sense of peace within them and tranquility. That there is a greater love than you've ever known before. 13 years after I was diagnosed with HIV and then had HIV symptomatics, I was diagnosed with AIDS complications.
My grandparents and my aunt called and they said that she probably wouldn't make it through the weekend. So I went over there, and when I saw her, it was devastating to see her so small and without her normal spark and enthusiasm and smile. You know, it was heartbreaking to see her at first and look at her in the doorway, and then once I saw her crack a little bit of a smile, it was just like love just pouring out from both of us to each other, and just ran over there and squeezed her and got in bed next to her, and just holding her and spooning her and loving her and kissing her, and that meant so much to me as well as her, and just to like have that mother-daughter love, you know, be so strong.
Her warm body next to me felt so good because I was so cold. Sometimes it felt like, you know, my fevers were 103, and sometimes I felt so cold that my body shook like I thought it was an earthquake. I was shaking so hard. And her warm body really warmed me up physically and mentally and spiritually. And we didn't talk much that night because I was so weak, but telepathically we talked a lot. And she knew that this was probably the time that it would be the last time that she would be with me. And the morning she woke up and she says, "Mom, I'm going to go to your house and take a shower, and I'll be right back. Is there anything you want?" And I had the energy to say, "Yes, you to come back to me." And as soon as she walked out of the hospital room, immediately my spirit was lifted out of my physical body, and it was hovering over my physical body, and I immediately felt healed. I felt more alive and more at peace and more love than I'd ever experienced. And then all of a sudden, two spirit beings came towards me, and I sensed them to be male and female. I could see them, yet I could see through them. And telepathically, they said that they wanted to show me a review of my life. And I saw myself looking down. One scene I was in Russia, one scene I was in Los Angeles, one I was in Hawaii, and one I was in Japan. And all different scenes in different countries. And in each scene, some of the people I remembered, and some of the incidents I remembered, and some of them I had totally forgot about. But these spirit guides telepathically said, "Look at the difference you've made in these people's lives." And as I'm going through the tunnel of light, I want to say, where's Tommy and Raymond, my brothers that have died? Where are all my friends that have died? And all of a sudden, the beautiful light of God comes before me and completely surrounds me, and we become one. Telepathically, I hear, my child, unlike the time before, this time you have a choice. This time you can remain with me, or you can return. But before you make your decision, I want to show you one more thing. And instantly, I was reliving, not reviewing, but actually reliving being pregnant with my daughter, feeling the very first kick with my daughter, giving birth to my daughter, and different things throughout Janine's 19 years of life, doing different things with Janine. And then all of a sudden, a spark of light hit me. And as the spark of light hit me, I was back in the tunnel of light. And telepathically, the light of God said, what is your decision? I said, I need to return to my daughter. Instantly, I was back in my hospital bed. Next hour to hour and a half, I could see every single cell in my body. It didn't matter if my eyes were open or shut. I could see every cell in my body vibrating with light. It was like effervescent sublimate bubbles bouncing up and down, every single cell. And I knew before long I would be out.
Definitely seemed like a miracle. Knowing that she decided to come back was the best thing I'd ever heard and ever felt. And she really did seem different too. I mean, even though she was the same weight and the same person in the bed, but when I came back, she definitely had much more color in her face and more energy, and just had this sparkle in her eye again. And that was pretty intense and beautiful to see. I think she's here because her story is really powerful, her love is really powerful. Everybody that meets her is completely affected by her and touched by her. And our love.
There's no fear. There's only love. That's all there is. And that's really all there is around here, too. We've just forgotten. We become separated. We forgot that we are one with Source. We are one with one another. We are one with every kingdom there is. We've forgotten that we are all the light, that we are all the divinity, that we are all one within. I asked, what is my life purpose now? And what I was told is, show people how to break the silence about death and dying. Bring the sacredness of life and death back. I talk about the other side. The only thing I can say is I never went past the tunnel. I went through the tunnel, but I never went past the tunnel. I was given an opportunity to. I was given a choice if I wanted to or not. But after seeing and reliving being with my daughter, I said, no, I needed to return to her. So what comes after that light or after the tunnel, I can't tell you because I've not seen it. But it's got to be magnificent. It's hard for the person that is alive, that has lost a loved one. But I think if they can understand that, in my belief anyhow, that their spirit lives on, and you can always communicate with them, and you can always talk to them, and they can hear you, that their spirit is around you. And so they're not far away. The veil between life and death is so thin. It's so thin.
Thank you. So after my near-death experience, within about 6 months, I realized I had to leave Utah. And I had to either move to San Francisco, Los Angeles, or San Diego to be in an AIDS organization and AIDS community and get support from them. Even though I felt so healthy, I needed to be in that kind of support, so I left Utah. And I asked for meditation, and now when I'm saying meditation, I don't mean I'm sitting on a pillow anymore and I'm going silent for 20 minutes. Now meditation to me is I can be walking out in nature, I can be taking a shower, I can be sitting anywhere, to me, that is a meditation, and I can hear the voice of God within me. And I asked, what do you want me to do now? And I was told to write a book on all the healing modalities that I've taught around the world. And so I ended up writing The Integrated Being, Techniques to Heal Your Mind, Body, Spirit, which Mary has. And then when I was done with that, I said, okay, now what would you like me to do? And what I heard was, create a documentary on near-death experiences. I said, what? Create a documentary on near-death experiences. I said, well, I'm not a producer. You're not the producer. God is the producer. It's going to work through you. And everything lined up with ease and grace. The people that we interviewed were all people that had never shared their stories before, so it was healing for them. We had award-winning videography that did it for free. We had award-winning songwriter that helped me write a song for my daughter for the movie. And everything just fell right into place. It was just magnificent. It was the most amazing experience I'd ever had, just to release and say, God, work through me. Show me the way. Open the doors. And it was just magical. And when I was done with the documentary, we did one other documentary, and then I was told to write the third book, There's More, 18 Near-Death Experiences. And the next step that I did was I started Sacred Living, Sacred Dying, and Guide to Embracing, Sacred Living publishers and also productions. So now I have a publishing company for self-help books, spirituality books, healing books, and also a production company. And my last journey that I know is coming right now is I'm moving back to Hawaii, and I'm going to help set up a green burial site in Maui. And then I'm also going to help to bring Eternal Reefs, which is on the East Coast, where people will bring their ashes and put them in a cement container, kind of cement reef, and put them in the ocean, and that's where the ashes will be. So this is where I know I'm guided to do next, and what comes after that, I don't know, but I'm open for it. So thank you all for letting me share my story, and look forward to something
Okay, yes, thanks. So I've been a member of this club, FMBR, since about the same time that Bill joined. I don't remember if it was 97 or 98. But I live in San Francisco, so I hardly ever get down here for a meeting. And so when I published a book last September, and I sent a letter down to Bill Goff, and I said, by the way, I could talk on this. And then he got me involved with doing this, so I'm here. I've given a couple of other talks on it. I like to use whatever that is.
Can you see the PowerPoint?
The PowerPoint, yeah. I like to use PowerPoint. And you're going to now get the dry lecture. I teach high school kids all the time, and I teach creative thinking and critical thinking. And so the thing about the afterlife that's most important to me is the science. Now, I had a near-death experience 44 years ago. It's in the book if you want to know about it. It's in the book if you want to know about it. The book's over there on the table. I'm not going to tell my story. They've got other people telling their story this evening. I'm going to talk about the science. Because not so that you can convince a skeptic. A skeptic cannot be convinced of the afterlife. They have reasons that they want to not believe. And sometimes their reasons are based on childhood fears that they may have. And so until you erase those fears, they're not going to believe you no matter what you produce as proof. But the afterlife is very real. Some of the things that you'll hear us say are almost unbelievable. You say, well, wait, you went and you saw this white light. Yes, I've seen the white light. It's real. The afterlife is extremely real. In fact, it's more real than the 3D reality that we live in here. It's more real than anything I've ever experienced. Now, here we're experiencing 3 or 4 dimensions, if you want to call time a dimension. There, you're in a different dimension, and it's more real. It's more, you can feel it. Here, you have to hear somebody speak, like me. If you can't hear me, you have to turn off the microphone. There, you get the message by ESP. You don't hear what they're saying. You get what they're saying. It's totally different. When I was there in the afterlife, I was more at home than any place I've ever been in my life. If you know what, the feeling when you get home, you feel safe. You feel safe there. Today I'm going to talk about the implications of immortality and the science of what happens after you die. After having personally survived that near-death experience, the two most important things to me were these: understanding the science which validates the existence of the afterlife and telling others what dying was like, and that there is nothing at all to fear from death. You shouldn't be afraid of it. But after my first NDE, everyone simply refused to believe me. They didn't want to hear it. I had that NDE in 1970, and they still like to throw you in the nut house if you talked about it. They thought you were crazy. The psychiatrist tried to convince me. They discharged me out of the hospital. I was there 33 days. They discharged me in about 15 minutes out the back door. My orthopedic surgeon did.
Wow.
They were trying to put me in. The medical doctors do not believe in a consciousness which exists independent of the body. And the pastors at my church had a different belief of exactly how the afterlife should be, based on ancient speculations. And they told me that since my NDE did not agree with their interpretation of the scripture about the afterlife, that it could not possibly be true. I'm trying to tell them, this is what happened to me. From these experiences, it was clear to me that the world's reaction to death and the afterlife were motivated by their fears rather than any attempt at intelligent inquiry. And this means that every skeptic you will ever meet will continue to disbelieve, regardless of the proofs you present, until you first remove their unconscious fears. No amount of scientific proof will ever be good enough for them so long as they are motivated by conscious fears. Consequently, the science that I will now present is not intended to convince any skeptics. Instead, I'm sharing this with you so that you will feel secure in the knowledge that the science of quantum physics really does support belief in the afterlife. No skeptic will then be able to cause you to have any doubts that the afterlife is real. So let's, where's that? Clicker. There it is. Okay. So that moves us to 2. The Tibetan Book of the Dead stated in the 8th century, no intelligent tourist would depart for a foreign land without a good guidebook giving directions on basic preparations, necessary equipment, dangers, and obstacles. No Tibetan would depart the known territory of this life without a good guidebook for the afterlife. Now in my book, I compare the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the near-death experience. So you can look at that. But science cannot tell you today, even with all our technology and advanced medicine, what awaits you on the other side of death. We have simply never bothered to completely investigate the afterlife, and our most respected thinkers and scholars, like the late Carl Sagan, admit that they simply do not know whether any part of us survives the death of the physical body. According to a spring 2007 survey conducted by AARP magazine, 73% of people over 50 years old believe in life after death. So why has Western science never bothered to investigate this thoroughly? It's because among scientists, there's only 16% that believe in after death, afterlife. Yet this is the most important question of life, and it should be the first question we answer. We're all afraid of this question. Unfortunately, the majority of materialist scientists simply refuse to look into the question scientifically, but instead continue their unfounded belief that there can be no life after death, even though they have no data to back up their position. Okay. Carl Sagan also defined that type of belief without any evidence as follows. This is a quote from one of his Gifford lectures over in Scotland. I would like to suggest that superstition is very simple. It is merely belief without any evidence. So the idea that you believe that there's no afterlife, and that there's no consciousness, that it's all part of the wet brain, with no data to prove that, is in fact superstition. Now we have a lot of data that proves the afterlife. On the other hand, there's a great deal of scientific evidence proving the afterlife, which has been carefully compiled over the last 150 years. There are also thousands of eyewitnesses like me who can say, I've been there, I've done that, and the afterlife is very, very real. Back in 1970, 5 years before Dr. Moody had coined the term near-death experience, in his best-selling book, Life After Life, I was killed in a motorcycle accident, but I later returned to the same body for a second life. And if you're interested, the details are in the book. After the near-death experience, I knew that the afterlife was real and that our spirit survives outside the physical body. Our consciousness exists outside the physical body. I also wanted to know the scientific laws behind it all, and I realized from my research that Western materialist science is never going to voluntarily investigate the afterlife. Many scientists are unwilling to accept the implications of quantum mechanics, which show that matter itself is made of consciousness. Okay. But for true scientists gifted with the intellectual capacity sufficient to embrace quantum mechanics, with all its implications, including the controversial concepts like mind over matter and hidden variables, and also to allow the validity of seemingly contradictory theories like non-locality, string theory, and superstring or M theory, to persist in a multifaceted, conscious universe, then the afterlife becomes very easy to verify using quantum field theory. But the materialist science community, which dominates biology, the medical field, and non-physics science education, simply refuses to adopt the quantum view of the universe, continuing to use the 17th century tools of Newtonian physics and the monistic view of the universe, which have served them so well for 300 years, but which did not allow for a soul or a spirit. Now Einstein said, there is no place in this new kind of physics, that's quantum mechanics, for the field and also matter. For the field is the only reality. To paraphrase Einstein, matter does not exist in any physically real way. It's only an illusion precipitated by energy fields. So the old idea is still being taught in the Newtonian physics classes you and I took in high school, that if it can't be measured, then it is not real, is no longer valid 21st century science. Instead, we live in a universe, where am I? I should be on 4.
Yet the Spiritus Church.
Yeah, I'm on the right spot. Okay. Instead, we live in a universe made up of interacting energy fields existing in 11 dimensions, 8 of which we have not yet been able to discern because they exist in the dark matter of the zero-point field, which makes up 96% of our universe. In other words, there is much, much more in our universe that we just don't know and haven't yet discerned than there is of those things that we do know. So with all that unknown out there, how can we say that with the 4% of the universe we can discern that we know what isn't, that there's no afterlife? How can we say that? We don't know the other 96%. Yet, in the spiritualist church, which demonstrates the existence of the afterlife through the practice of mediumship, by holding real-time conversations with the so-called dead, they take the official position that all the phenomena that we observe regarding the afterlife do not violate, but instead follow all the laws of physics, both the known laws and those laws which science has not yet discovered. Am I in the right place? Am I going the right direction?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay, one more forward. There we go. That philosophical position is actually much more scientific than the practice of many Newtonian materialists who pretend to be scientific, but who are purposefully ignoring the data, proving consciousness survival, merely in order to maintain their comfortable superstitions that there cannot possibly be a spirit which exists outside the body, and therefore no afterlife. Now the overwhelming evidence, the overwhelming scientific data proving the afterlife includes near-death experiences, after-death communications, and remembered past lives. And PMH Atwater talks about kids that remember lives, and we all talk about near-death experiences, and many of us are involved in after-death communication. These are the 3 areas. And for those who want to know more about those 3 areas of research, I discuss all of this in my book and provide references. There's 107 references in there for you guys to look this stuff up. Tells you where all this comes from. To all the scientific literature backing this up. The implications of immortality. In the past, each of these 3 fields of inquiry had its own set of scientists who carried out the experiments and collected data in their specific field of focus. But recently, the 3 fields of inquiry have been found to overlap and to also provide replication for each other. Therefore, we're now on the cusp of a new scientific paradigm. Never before in the history of knowledge has there been such a wealth of cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary data converging from so many different streams of experience, all of which is providing hints of what lies beyond the physical veil. All of it is contributing to a potential new science of survival, rebirth, and the non-physical dimensions of existence. Indeed, we live in an age of discovery, and the veil between this world and whatever lies beyond seems to be yielding its secrets as never before to the endless curiosity of the human mind. And like explorers setting foot on a new continent that was once only the subject of rumor, belief, and speculation, we are establishing beachheads on the subtle sands of the non-physical realms and getting a sense of the initial landscape. And this is Carter Phipps from What is Enlightenment magazine, number 32, March to May 2006. Then they go public, and they publish a paper describing the findings. I didn't get there, did I? There you go. Describing the findings. At that point, other scientists will attempt to replicate the experiment, and if their independent work provides the same or similar data, then the hypothesis is assumed to have been proved. But just how do you replicate a near-death experience? Anyone want to volunteer? We'll go out and try to kill you and see if you'll live. And if you'll live, then we'll see if you had an experience. And only about 30% of those who go through death and come back have a memory of a near-death experience. So we probably get 70% said, no, it's not true, it didn't happen. Because of this difficulty, I propose a new criteria for effective replication, which is that if the same results can be obtained from a different field of inquiry, which also may not be repeatable, then such results taken together should constitute valid replication and prove the hypothesis. In my research, I recently read of an after-death communication which appears to replicate my own near-death experience. Back in 1906, Edward C. Randall, the New York attorney, published his findings after 15 years of research into the after-death communications, working with the direct voice medium, Emily S. French. Randall recorded the death process as experienced by a medical doctor, Dr. David S. Hossack, who had died some 60 years previously, but was speaking to Randall in 1906 from the afterlife. Dr. Hossack described the death process in exactly the same terms we use today to describe the NDE. And here's his words. There was this meeting and greeting with my own family who came to welcome me, as naturally as one returning after a long journey in the earth life would be welcomed. And their bodies were not so dense as when they were inhabitants of earth, but they were like my own, and he's over there. Then I was told that my body and the bodies of all those in that life were actually the identical bodies that we had in earth life, divested of the flesh covering. And I was also told that the condition was a necessary precedent to entering the higher life, and that such bodies in earth life had a continuity, and further, that in leaving the old I had come to a plane where all was etheric, or I like to say dark energy. That is matter vibrating in perfect accord with my spirit, technically speaking, the etheric self, this dark matter spirit body. And to me, everything seemed perfectly natural to sense, sight, and touch. Again, let me tell you that the outer flesh garment is not sufficiently sensitive to feel, and the etheric body, spiritual body alone has sensation. I found little body change. I had sensations and vision, and my personal appearance was in no way changed except that my body was less dense, more transparent, as it were, but the outline of my form was definite, my mind clear, the appearance of age was gone, and I stood a man in the fullness of my mentality, nothing gained or lost mentally. And in this description of how he was met by his departed loved ones, Dr. Hossack describes the same phenomena that occurs in the modern near-death experience. Yet this report is from a book published in 1906, which was long before NDEs were, and there's some mistakes up there, were even subject of discussion. So the author could not have heard of the concept of an NDE or what it might involve. Yet there was a writer in 1906 describing exactly what happened during the NDE and stating that it was received in an after-death communication from a deceased person describing his own experience. To me, this constituted excellent replication of my own near-death experience and proved, as far as I was concerned, that the NDE is the same experience as the so-called real death experience, which occurs at the end of life. after which the person remains dead. But Dr. Hossack also went on to describe how everything in the universe was made out of this same life force, i.e. a non-local conscious universe. He said, what impressed me most after meeting with my own family and friends was the reality and tangibility of everything and everyone. All those with whom I came in contact had bodies like my own, and I recognized friends and acquaintances readily. And now I will tell you of the one thing that impressed me most on coming here, and that was that matter in its intense refinement, in its higher vibration, as observed here in the afterlife, was capable of intelligent thinking and direction. Matter was capable of intelligent thinking and direction. Shape and grasp this proposition if you can. I could not in the beginning, nor could I comprehend at once, that all in the universe was life and nothing else. Now this Dr. Hossack is the guy who founded the Columbia Medical School, King's College it was called then, but he founded Columbia Medical School. This fact which we now know in the field of the afterlife, will overturn the propositions of science in the earth life. In all the orthodox teaching of nearly 2,000 years, not one law has been given tending to show how it was possible for individual life to hold continuity. It means to continue into future lives. Theology had claimed it without explaining how or where. This no longer satisfies the human heart or mind, a fact which accounts for the great unrest amongst people in every land. And for this reason, it has been our aim to explain the law through which life is continued. In other words, the reason he's talking through Emily French to Randall is that he wants to explain the law through which life is continued. And so simply to state the facts and explain the conditions that all may understand. Dr. Hossack went on to explain the key to the understanding all this is to comprehend the dark energy which forms 96% of the conscious universe. When we understand that, we'll be able to resolve all of this. The key to comprehension is first to, and this is his words, the key to comprehension is first to realize that your Earth, i.e. light energy reality of 3D, does not contain all the matter in the universe. This is in 1906. Nobody's invented quantum theory yet. And all that you see and touch is but the substance used by life in growth. And if you have any biologists here, we can talk about chlorophyll and we'll go down that route. But we're not going to digress. When one leaves the earth condition, light energy reality, and divests himself of the physical housing, he, through such a change into the dark energy, ceases to be mortal. By becoming a resident of that new sphere, a higher vibration, different dimension, a different field of energy, he is said to take on immortality, a higher vibration. But in reality, he has always been immortal. In other words, his spirit, which occupied the body, has always been at a higher vibration. Dr. Hossack's message from the afterlife in 1906 was that we live in a conscious universe and that understanding this concept would revolutionize physics. He said, matter itself is capable of intelligent thinking and direction. This fact will overturn the propositions of science. In other words, let's think about rocks. Rocks are capable of thinking. They are made out of conscious universe. They're made out of intelligence. So the rocks think. That's quite a thought, isn't it? Or at least the rocks contain thoughts. They're made out of conscious universe. Just a few years later, in 1926, Erwin Schrödinger, founder of quantum mechanics, defined mathematically the duality of Du Bois' wave function and went further to state that, inconceivable as it seems to ordinary reason, you and all other conscious beings, as such, are the all in all, the soul of the conscious universe, your God. As surely as, and when he says she, he's talking about the conscious universe, as surely as she will engulf you tomorrow, so surely will she bring you forth anew to new striving and suffering, and not merely someday. Hence, this life of yours, which you are living, is not merely a piece of the entire existence, but it is, in a certain sense, the whole. Did Sharon say that we're one? We're all one in the light. This is Schrödinger, the Schrödinger equation, guys. Physicists who worked trying to work the equation. You know what I'm talking about. This is the man saying it. And what this means is that you move your hand and the universe carries out the subtle energy transformation from dark energy to light energy that constantly supports the holographic illusion of matter. My hand is here, and then it's here, and then it's here. It ceases to exist here, and it comes up over there, and we keep doing this. We precipitate this with our vision. You can see me moving my hand, and I know I'm moving my hand, so we're connected, aren't we? Because it's not really there. There's nothing here but a field. I'm making that field move. So it's stopping being here, and it's reappearing there, and stopping being there, and reappearing there. This is what it means when the universe reestablishes you thousands of times daily. Okay? What this means is that when you move your hand and the universe carries out the subtle energy transformation from dark energy to light energy that constantly supports the holographic illusion of matter, which is you here in space-time, and continues to instantaneously recreate the hologram of your hand in the moving positions and gives you the illusion of movement. You think, and the universe performs the particle physics magic to make it so. To paraphrase Albert Einstein's comment that only fluids actually exist, I prefer that only fields actually exist. I would prefer to say instead, there is no place in quantum physics for consciousness and also matter, because consciousness is the only reality. Now, in summation, my explanation for the reality I experienced in the afterlife, and this is the last slide, so the rest is just going to read. My explanation for the reality I experienced in the afterlife is that we each exist individually in a non-local information center located in an alternative dimension which in a spatial universe would be outside of reality. But in our non-local universe, where space is only a perceptive illusion, these alternative dimensions interpenetrate our 3D reality. We have each chosen to experience various realities in various different dimensions by simply shifting the nexus of our perception into that dimension. For this current physical lifetime, we choose to experience this 3D space-time reality from inside a physical body. At the death of the physical body, our consciousness, the real us, simply shifts the nexus of our perception to a different dimension into the afterlife. When you go, it's like that. We talk about going through a tunnel and all the things to get to the light. But when you leave the body, you're just moving your nexus, your location, your locale, to a different dimension. To a different dimension, the afterlife. And then we continue to exist, but without those restrictions on our senses, which were imposed by our perception of being in the physical, where we experience space and time. The energy fields projected by our conscious perception provide the hidden variables in Schrodinger and Dirac equations, resulting in the state vector collapse as they intersect holographically, precipitating the matter we experience in this 3D reality. That's what's going on when I move my hand. And you're all in agreement. You saw that, didn't you? So we're having the same perception. So it's pretty strong. After the speakers are all finished, I'll be available for your questions. But now I want to describe a couple of things my book does. My book has two parts. The first part, it discusses the science of these three fields of inquiry which prove the afterlife, and the history of the near-death experience from ancient times to the present. And especially fun is Chapter 6, entitled Consciousness and the Quantum Field Theory. And in Part 2, it gives a roadmap describing the death process, including all the sensations you will experience from your last breath until you get to meet with the being of light. And then goes on to describe several possible scenarios for your continuing afterlife. Now, I didn't go over there. I was with the light and I came back. But I put out some scenarios of what it might be like. And if you're interested in a copy, I'll have them for sale over here, or you can get them. They're also available in Kindle, iBook, and Nook online from Amazon. And I think that's it. So. If you have questions, I'll be glad to talk later about the science behind all this and talk about the references that I have and where I get all this theory. Okay, but I can't put it all in a half-hour lecture. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to be back. The last time we met, that was 2 years ago.
Hold the mic
Something
up
like
to
that?
your mouth, please. Yeah, thanks.
There?
Yeah.
Better?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I'm very glad to be here again. My name is Nadia McCaffrey. I'm a 3-time near-death experiencer. You probably have heard of some of my deaths and my experiences before. But I'm going to go kind of fast over these. The first one, I was 7 years old. And I was born in France in 1945, so when I had my first experience, it was 1952. I was bitten by an asp, a snake, and I went into a coma for 10 days. And that's where I had an encounter with a lady of light. She introduced herself to me as "Je suis ta petite maman du ciel," which means I am your little mother of the sky, because probably I was 7 years old. And I had this first light experience, which was extremely deep, changed my life. It's so clear and so vivid up until today. I had so many, all the details. I remember the clothes I wore. I remember the shoes I had on. I remember my grandmother's outfit. I remember the snake so well. So my life basically was changed and started all over when I was 7 years old. Because of the message that speaking French now, the message that I received, I was pointed very clearly that I would be working pretty much all my life with people, helping people. Didn't mean much of it because the rest of the message was in metaphor, was not really as we speak normally. And it took me years to really understand. After different episodes in my life, then I realized that I was going through something that already was being told to me. This life, this amazing encounter, I will never forget, and I will always want to go back to it. When I was 17 years old, I wanted to return to this light. I wanted to be with her. Not knowing how to do this, I tried to commit suicide, what you would refer to as, which really wasn't. I wanted to be back in this space. I wanted to be with her. I wanted to be part of this light. And that's all that counted. It's something that you cannot describe. It's something so deep, so lovable. It is it. There is nothing else that anyone would want. This attempt failed, obviously. I was sent back and told very clearly, very loudly, you can't stay, you have work to do. And this time it was a man's voice. It was not her, like I was hoping, but I was in the night. And I did have this experience again. However, I had the experience of the tunnel and floated above my body, saw myself on a gurney. I was in the hospital. I was 17 again. Didn't want to come back. But believe me, you just don't argue with this voice. You just do not. And I will argue with everybody, or anybody, if I think I have a point. But I didn't. So what was the choice? I had to go on. My son was born in 1970. Before this, I married an American in France, in Paris, where I was a student and working. We came to the United States in 1968. My son, again, was born 2 years later at Stanford, right here. And he was the joy of my life. He was my life. He was killed in Iraq
in 2004. He worked in Palo Alto on Off-Page Mill Road. He was managing a small company. He was making a good living. Had 2 children. Well, he actually had 3. I just found one out. And he didn't need it, anything at all. But then 9/11 happened. 9/11 happened. And he was like a lion in a cage. I need to do something. I need to do something. Well, of course, he didn't say anything to anyone, and he just enlisted with the National Guards. Not the International Guards, the National Guards. Well, we know what happened to the National Guard next. They were shipped to Iraq as well. But his idea was to be here, within the country, within California, for another catastrophe, to be able to help out people. Well, things worked out differently, obviously. Before his death, I worked with hospice for almost 18 years. I worked with Compassion in Action, Daniel Brinkley. I started the first chapter here in the Bay Area. Actually, it was not Compassion in Action, it was called Project Nightlight. And it was started by a nurse from Los Angeles who worked with AIDS as well. Cassandra.
Right.
Yes.
Christensen.
Right. Cassandra, I met, I love the way she worked with people. She created this way of working that it was the trained volunteer to learn how to be at the bedside. And most of the techniques were based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which I really admired. Shortly after death, she lost her non-profit. Daniel Brinkley became president, and the whole thing became Compassion in Action. I started the first chapter here, but I started with Cassandra first. And then, I think it was 1999, I wasn't be sure of this, I started something else called Angel Staff. Angel Staff was the same sort of a thing, but I trained about 1,000 volunteers in the Bay Area. It was the same work as Compassion in Action. We made a lot of difference, but we worked one-on-one. In other words, we had professionals working with us, and we were there for the families, we were there for people who needed us, and we started to work on the rights of the dying. This was before my son's death. After Patrick was killed, I changed, obviously, everything. My life just came to a stop, and the other phase of my life started. I spoke since 2004 until 2006, non-stop, across country, internationally. In 2006, there was a big splash on the news. I had a huge conference in front of my house in Tracy with all the big, CNN was there, Newsweek was there, everybody was there because of my son. There was a cover-up on his death, and everything came to the surface because of, with the help of Senator Boxer. That day, General Yeoman, who was Patrick's commander, came to my house to deliver, finally, the papers, the official papers of my son's death and how he died. I was told that he was killed in an ambush by insurgents. Well, actually, he was killed by 5 Iraqi soldiers that he was training. Completely different story. One was not an Iraqi soldier, he was a mercenary. And he was actually paid to kill the Americans. Well, this came to the surface. There was, because I started to move so much flow around this, an inquiry and a criminal investigation started with Iraq. That stopped 2 years ago. but we found out a lot of things. I have been to the Middle East myself, and I plan to go back to meet some of the people who were there when it happened, and I want to meet some of the children of the village where Patrick was killed, who are now grown up. In the meantime, I became a very strong advocate for veterans. I work with the VA, I work with all kinds of other organizations, and I'm talking about all of this because I have a mission. After my near-death experiences, it took me until the last one, which was in 1999. In 1999, I actually died with PMH Atwater's granddaughter. I followed every steps of this child's death and went into a coma. Very short coma, but that's when the last experience that I ever had happened. And that's where I had a life review, not of me, but of the earth, of tomorrow, of what will happen, where we were at. And it was very clearly shown that we had a choice then. Well, we don't have a choice anymore. We have a lot of work to do. We're in the middle of it. And I won't comment on the rest of the things that I've seen. It's really up to us to elevate our consciousness enough so we can really make a difference and change things. In the meantime, well, I still work with veterans, and sometimes I had another loss very recently. My son's house was lost to the bank. And this house I had transformed and changed into another shelter, but a veterans home. Meaning by this, that after his death, I opened it to veterans who were homeless, mainly, and returned from war, Iraq or Afghanistan. What I did, I fed them, clothed them, and walked them through the VA so they could receive their benefits. I did this since 2006 up until last year, this year. So I had a foreclosure on a house, couldn't get funding to keep going. I'm now moved to Long Beach, California. It's a chapter closed in my life. It was hard to let go because it was my son's house. But hey, if I can survive his death, I can survive this, right? So here I am again, starting some other things. In the meantime, I started something called Farmer Veterans Coalition. It's all over the country. And what it is, it started in Santa Cruz between maybe 3 farmers and 5 veterans and a Gold Star mother, because that's what I am. A Gold Star mother is somebody who has lost a child at war. The organization, I say this for those who don't know, was started after World War I and really launched after World War II. They are from Washington, DC, and they are very well known. Anyway, I'm a Gold Star mom. I'm part of that. So because of this whole thing, we had this little meeting that we had in Santa Cruz by the ocean. I was invited, I was listening. And they asked me, what do you think? And I said, guys, listen to yourself. Veterans need work, they're homeless. They come from war, they don't have a future, basically. They have PTSD, how do you treat that? Farmer, you don't have people to work and farm. Where are you going to find the people? They're right here. Get together. So we started Farm Not Arms, that became Veterans, a Farmer Veterans Coalition. It's organic farming. We create, I'm one of the founders, of course, still today. They were at the White House just last month. It's all over the country. And what it does, it provides scholarship for veterans to be able to buy their own farm. Create for them a future with this organic farming, because small farms are being destroyed in America. There are very few farms who have survived the economy these days. But because of this movement, it's going to be completely revived.
Wow.
Okay? So, yes. Those are some of the things that I am doing, that I will keep doing. I don't look back, really. I just keep, today, you know, I'm in Long Beach, okay, I lost my house, okay. But since I have been moved there, the VA has contacted me. Quite a few organizations have contacted me again, because I also was an activist. So I've spoke many times in Los Angeles, people know about me. I'm so busy, they overbooked me for next weekend. Okay, so there are a lot of things happening. The city of Los Angeles invited me to 2 meetings so far, one in Venice and the other one in San Pedro. This is because Los Angeles is building all kinds of housing for veterans, but not just for veterans. They are trying to combine low-income housing, regular housing, and seeing how to situate the building, the location for veterans, of the habitat. They don't have any idea on how to work this. They don't know what veterans need, really. You know, they think they can put, I think their ideas was to be able to put in the same housing families with children and new return veterans from the war. No, it's not going to work. I can tell them that right now. You know, veterans returning from war do not trust anybody but veterans. They need care. They need to talk to people who understand them. They need really a different kind of environment to begin with at first. I'm not saying that later on, when they will be adjusted to their new life, that this is not going to be possible. No, it's not what I'm saying. But in the meantime, they need to hear what I have to say on the subject, because I have been at it so long now that here we are. So who knows where I'm going to be next year? I don't know either. But I know one thing, that I'm not going to stop until, you know, this body gives in. Well, that's another thing. You know, I want to do all kinds of things. I want to follow what I have to do. This is my mission. And this mission has changed from the dying to the veterans, to survival. That's what it's about. The last near-death experience that I have had was very clearly, one thing was shown to me, were centers. First, Iraq. So when I got off the plane in the Middle East, I couldn't get out of the plane. I know I was there. This was the vision that I had. The sky, the color of the sky is so different. The soil was it. This man, this Middle Eastern man, I was the only one left in the plane. He turned and said, "Ma'am, can I help you?" And I couldn't talk, so he just kind of grabbed my elbow gently and helped me out of the plane. The rest of the people were already out. You have no idea how heavy the emotion was that day. First of all, walking where my son's blood was spilled, but also know that this was the beginning of the turning point for this future. So the vision had shown me this land, but also centers, places where people would be able to survive with each other, to revive the loving being that we really are. We forget this. Money is always the first front. Interest, power, keep people on the tongue, control. What happened to us? I know know I'm preaching to the poor, but what happened to this world? Imagine if we could all embrace each other, help each other, grow things, sustain life, instead of destroying it, one way or another. This is about the future. This is about tomorrow. This is us. It's about us. It's about all of us. It's never been about me. I'm just a messenger here. But this consciousness that we are aware of needs to be solidified, needs to grow. It's not going to do it by itself. We have work to do, not just me. We do, all of us. I'm trying to do that, but I can't do it alone. I'm not afraid of death. This is the fact that, when I'll be done with this mission, believe me, I'll be glad to go home. Okay? I'm not going to try again because they don't want me up there. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, so I got it. Okay? But in the meantime, we need to, make this circle larger. And I think my point was made. I love you all. Thank you.
Can you hear me all right? Am I okay? Yeah. Need it a little higher? Is that better? Yes. That's better. Good. I've been researching near-death states since the year after I died. I began in 1978. Died 3 times in 3 months in 1977. I'm going to pass around for all of you my before and after photos. I happen to have them with me. The color photo is taken about 2 months before I died with my 3 children, 1 boy, 2 girls. And the black and white was taken a 1.5 years after I died. So I want someone in the back to kind of collect that because I want it back, okay? I don't want anybody to leave with those photos. Those are original photos. Let me say before I say any more that Nadia's 2 cases as a child are in my book, The New Children and Near-Death Experiences, which is for sale here. Her cases as an adult is also in my book, We Live Forever, which is also for sale here. So if you want her cases, they're here. Nadia was part of my original research base. That original research base now numbers nearly 4,000 adult and child experiencers. I've written 10 books on my findings. Some of my findings have now been upheld in clinical studies, including the Dutch study done by Pim van Lommel and Associates, and was published in Lancet Medical Journal. It was published September 15, 2001. I told everybody I want an Oscar for Christmas. To be in Lancet Medical Journal, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I've been obsessive. I've been passionate. I have done this work the first 2.5 decades days a week, sometimes 7, averaging a 12 to 14-hour day. It's only been about 5-6 years ago that I gave myself permission to work a 5-day week, maybe 7 hours a day, and I feel positively lazy. The wrap-up of my findings is also here. Near-death experiences, the rest of the story. Be prepared. The first half of the book will clear you up a lot about the near-death experience. For instance, most people do not experience a tunnel. I do not consider the tunnel a signature feature of near-death experiences. In the majority of countries in this world, you don't hear anything about a tunnel at all. Just mostly in the United States, a little bit in Canada, a few in Europe. That's it, period. Maybe a few in Australia. People don't experience the tunnel, mostly. They experience other things. We'll get into that on Sunday, when we have a good in-depth research about the rest of the story. That's what the book is about, the rest of the story. And the entire book shifts on chapter 16. The key is intensity. You see, you can't just look at the near-death experience. If you're only looking at half the story. The after effects are the other half. And the pattern of after effects are physiological as well as psychological. You don't just come back losing your fear of death and become kinder and more loving. Not by a long shot. You come back with a different brain function, different brain structure. Nervous system is different. Digestive system is somewhat different. Skin sensitivity is also different. And many of them come back with a lot of depression. They're finding out that how do you adjust to life as always when you're slightly different? Sometimes very different. It's not always easy. Let me give you a little hint of some of the things I went through between death number 2 and death number 3. I had a lot of problems walking and being able to hold my weight, and I was in a lot of pain. So I had a lot of problems with after effects. But I think the biggest challenge was how different my brain was. And to show you how different it was, I'm from Idaho, Boise, Idaho. Actually, I was born and raised in Twin Falls, Idaho. That's the reclaimed deserts of southern Idaho. And in that place, I wound up being raised by Norwegians. That's another story. Yeah, I have all kinds of stories. How did one get to be raised by Norwegians in the reclaimed deserts of southern Idaho? Well, you know. I was living then in Boise, Idaho. That's where I died. That's where I was also came back to life in Boise and was living in Boise. I was a bank analyst. I was delivering papers to Boise Cascade. Boise Cascade is a very large corporation. They had, their offices was one full city block. And you go inside, and all the offices are around the edge of the bank, and the middle of this about 3 or 4, maybe 5-story building is air. There's nothing in the middle except some self-supporting 4 elevators. That's it. Everything is air and trees and vines, and that's it. It's an arborarium. And the walkways on each floor to these central elevators is vinyl or glass. I don't know what it is, and you see through it. So it's very ethereal just to get from the office to an elevator. So I delivered my material. I was going toward the elevator, and this woman was coming forward from the other way, also headed toward the elevator. Beautiful woman. I mean, she was dressed like a movie star. This woman was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And all around her were scenes and thought forms of the dirtiest bathroom I've ever seen. It was filthy. And I walked up to her. You know, you should never do this, you never do this. But I walked right up to that woman and said to her out loud, "Don't you ever clean your bathroom?"
Oh my God.
And she got very huffy. And she said, "Well, I just haven't had time," and walked off. You know, she really denied it. And so for a while I was slapping my face saying, invaded her privacy, nasty, nasty. And then I just, you know, sort of leaned over the railing and just laughed my head off. But you know, what do you do? Many times walking down the street, I'd see people's past lives and future lives happening at the same time that their present life was happening, and I couldn't tell what to talk to. I just had some challenges. So please know that near-death experiences are not necessarily simple, even though they may seem simple. Please know they take some dealing with. They can be complicated, and we can talk about that and the rest of the story on Sunday. But, you know, the rest of the book, near-death experiences, the rest of the story, yes. It's sort of like Atwater Unplugged. Because I'm talking about what I really saw and verified. And then we're getting into transformations of consciousness and what transformations of consciousness really are and why we have them and where they lead us. Because that's what a near-death experience is. It's part of the larger genre of transformations of consciousness. So why did I ever become a researcher? Why the obsession? Turned down a lot of parties, a lot of vacations, did a lot of work. Why? Well, I died. That's why. 3 times in 3 months. First time, miscarriage. Extreme hemorrhaging, that was death. That was January 2, 1977. Boise, had a whole lot of snow, a lot of ice. Why was I pregnant? Because I was raped. This is kind of hard to deal with. And I love kids. So I put my hands on my uterus and I said to God, if this child is to leave, it must leave nature's way because there's no way I will have an abortion. 3 days later, the miscarriage began. I think it was 3 days later, 3 something. Not long after, the miscarriage began. And it was the way I was treated by the doctor. He knew better than to give me a shot in my right thigh vein, but he did anyway. He knew I couldn't handle the medication. He did it anyway. Laughing his head off all the way that a grown woman, mother of 3 children, could put herself in this position. The man was later sued as a quack, but I didn't know that at the time, and sent me home because he said the worst was over. And then we're to January 4, 1977. That was a Tuesday. January 2 was a Sunday. My son was long gone, sailing aboard a square rigger in the Atlantic Ocean. He had borrowed all this money for some classes in oceanography, and it turned out to be just a glorified high school. So he was very bereft. And he had returned very suddenly. Well, he wasn't there at the time. It was just the two girls, Natalie and Polly, and they went off to school. And then there was just so much blood. I just started bleeding again. And the doctor was of no help. I tried to get to a doctor, but I didn't. Because out of the side of my leg was growing what I thought was a volcano. It was a great big lump. And all around my right leg, the top part of my right leg, the skin was scarlet. And it turned out I had a major thrombosis in the right thigh vein, which dislodged, followed by the worst case of phlebitis the specialist had ever heard of, the Lundstein. And I died again. Oh, this time I knew what was happening. First time I didn't. This time I knew. I caught on. First experience was primarily out of body with some other features. I could see blobs in the air, and I didn't know what they were. The second time, and I'm just being very brief here because we don't have time. But the second time was also out of body, and the joy of being out of body. Didn't want to come back. And being sort of overtaken because I didn't move anywhere. It's just like another dimension came down and sort of took over, and I call it the void because I didn't know what else to call it. It was all darkness, yet all light, all silence, yet all sound. Everything was there, but nothing was there. And the only thing that was present in the void, this incredible place, was the presence of shimmer. If you've ever made a Jell-O dish and you take it out of the mold and you put it on the platter and you go to touch it, just as you are about to touch the Jell-O, it shimmers. That's the only movement in the void, is shimmer. And in that place, I had an experience with creation. Then I was met by loved ones who had died and gone on before me, including a grandfather I'd never met, never saw, never could. Back in my day, children like me were called bastards because I was born illegitimate. These days, they don't think anything of it. When I was born, it was a big deal. So, of course, I would never know that side of the family. And there was no way I could have known this grandfather or what he looked like or anything else. And he came up and introduced himself to me. Then Jesus came. It wasn't like any feeling to bow down, but rather Jesus, my elder brother, whom I haven't seen in a long, long time. And it was a reunion, and there was laughter, and there was joy. No great pronouncements. Laughter and joy. Hugging. Wonderful. And then I had a life review. I had one of the more radical ones. You know, lots of people have different kinds of life reviews. I was one of those who was relived. Notice I said relived. I didn't say watched. Relived every thought I had ever thought, every word I had ever spoken, every deed I had ever done since birth. plus the effect of that on anyone and everyone who walked in my environment, whether I met them or not, plus the effect of that on the air and on the water and on the soil and on the plants and on the animals. I got the full gestalt of my ever having lived in the earth plane. I don't know about the rest of you, but you know, I was taught that you're responsible for what you do. I was not taught that you're responsible for what you think and what you say. And I happen to think that that was hellish because I was ashamed of some of the things I saw and thought and said. And a lot of it I didn't mean. So that was a heavy for me. And I found myself forgiving myself because there were some things about my personality I liked. What I liked was I was a doer. Nobody ever had to tell me if something needed to be done. If I saw that it needed to be done, get out of my way, folks, it'll be done. Nobody has to tell me to get up and do anything. I do it. And I liked that. So I floated back into my body on a carpet of sparklers. Like on the 4th of July. Sparklers back into my body. This is incredible. However, I crawled all the way back to my bed instead of going the extra 3 to 4 feet to the phone because, like many near-death experiencers, I hadn't landed. I was still on the other side. I couldn't think straight. It took me several days to figure out something needed to be done. I didn't recognize my children. I didn't recognize a bed. I didn't recognize food. I didn't know what clothes were. I didn't know anything. I was still on the other side, and the only thought that got through was money. Money. My job was my only source of income. I had to get up, and I had to go to work. And how I dressed and drove my car to work without hurting anybody, I don't know. Parked the car. It was Idaho First National Bank, now it's called West One. At that particular time, they were building a new building, and so we were stuck in an old building, and I was on the 2nd floor and there's no elevator. So I'm trying to walk up the stairs and I'd go down and walk up a few more and fall down. It took forever to climb to the top of the stairs, and my boss was there, and she took one look at me and she said, "You're going to a doctor right now. So thank you for being there." Love that. And then 3 months later, March 29, I had the 3rd one. We don't know for sure what killed me. Might have been a heart attack. No vital signs. And again, an out-of-body experience, out into the night sky, high up into the sky. The earth became a little marble. I was leaving. You know, by this time, folks, I was through with life. I don't want it anymore. I mean, you can have it. I didn't want it. I was gone. And way out into the night sky was this lip of light. And as I got nearer to the lip, it's like a force field or something just sort of sucked me in. And I was greeted then, you know, how do you call it a light-filled world when it's super, super, super bright? It's power. You can't call that light. I can't call that light. I don't know what it was. But it was so bright, it was beyond light. And in that place, I saw 2 cyclones, one inverted over the other in an hourglass shape. And the big one, the top one, big on the top, came down to a spout. The one on the bottom, big on the bottom, came up to a spout. Where they should have touched but didn't, out of that came pulsations of power. It was the best I can do for drawing it, And I'll pass this around. And I saw myself in the top cyclone, about here, upper left. And over myself, I saw my past lives and all my future lives happening at the same time in the same space as my present life. And I came to and that was happening to everybody else, everywhere else, thousands, millions of people, same thing. And I came to realize that there's no such thing as left and right, top, bottom, backward, forward. Doesn't exist in the universe. The only thing that exists is simultaneity. That's all there is. In fact, the only movement in the universe is expansion and contraction, as if the whole universe is breathing. And I chose to go for the middle where the power was because I felt that was the path to God, and that's where I want to go, didn't want anything else. And as I was going there, I was able to witness creation and how it works. And I'm one of the few that could bring it back. It's in my book, Future Memory, which is also here. And as I was going for the middle, I heard this voice speak. I was acquainted with angels and guides and guardians and those kind of voices. This wasn't that kind of voice. Forget that. It was a voice so big. It was like big, 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 big. We don't have words for a voice that big. It filled the universe. And that voice said to me, and I quote, "Test revelation. You are to do the research. One book for each death." It did not name book 1, it did name book 2 and 3. By the way, Future Memory is book 2. It told me what was to be in each book, told me what this was all about, did not tell me how long it would take to do the work, or how to do the work. And I came back. You know, most of us forget that the majority of near-death experiences come from violence and trauma, so the experiencer has a body to rebuild. So you're dealing with what happened to your body as well as what happened to your soul, your mind. I was one of those that had the privilege of having to relearn how to crawl, how to stand, how to walk, how to run. Wow. I had habits, but I didn't have meaning. All the contextual basis was gone with life. So I put myself back in beginning classes all over, everywhere. I used to be a prize-winning cook, put myself back in beginning cooking. I raised 3 kids, put myself back in beginning home ec. I was teaching meditation for over a decade, put myself back in beginning meditation. I took everything all over again. Took a year. I was reasonably human. Let me just sort of wrap this up by saying what happened in November of that year, because I just kept getting worse. Even with all the classes and everything and exercises and constant, I was getting steadily worse. So finally, my doctor got up at 5:30 in the morning. Can you imagine doctor getting up at 5:30 in the morning just to give you a shot? He did. Gave me some pills. My friends, 3 of my friends came forward, and they decided I needed a change of scenery, so they were going to truck me up to Seattle, Washington, to attend the Mind Miraculous Symposium put on by the Science of Mind Church in the Opera House in Seattle Center. And by the time we made it up there, I was reasonably human. I could stand, I could walk, I could think. Woo, I'm a human. Went inside the Opera House, got good seats, sat down. The the first, speakers like Dr. Brujoy, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and on and on and on, the first speaker paid my way. The first speaker was Dr. William Tiller from Stanford, and his talk was The Eternal Now. Couldn't tell you a thing the man said till toward the end of his talk. He had flashed up on this big, huge screen, like 5 stories tall, massive screen, his rendition of The Eternal Now. He was convinced that the only movement in the universe was simultaneity, that everything happened at the same time. And that he could chart this. He could prove it in a chart. So he flashed up on that screen 2 cyclones, inverted over each other with this strange light coming out of the middle, hourglass shape. I jumped up from my seat. I ran out to the foyer. I collapsed under a light. And I cried out loud, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. He saw it too. I'm not crazy. And from that moment on, I got well. And it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who, the next year, met her at O'Hare Airport outside of Chicago. Her plane was late, about an hour late for Europe, so the 2 of us sat down on a bench, a couple of little schoolgirls yakety-yakking. And I told her what had happened to me, and she said, you are a near-death survivor. She didn't use the word experiencer, she said survivor. She told me about the classical model. She gave me those words, near-death experience, because I didn't know. Never heard of Raymond Moody, never heard of life after life. She validated me, but yet she caused, for me, more questions than answers. And it was a couple of months after meeting Elizabeth that I began my work. I have worked like this. Very few parties or dinners or vacations. I have worked like this because I can still hear that voice. I can still feel the power of that presence. I do my job because it is my job to do. And I do it with a smile on my face because it's my way of helping all of us see ourselves. I'm your mirror, and I record your reflections with the hope that that voice will help you hear who you are. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of quick thoughts here. Obviously, listening to these 3 women in particular, we can see how difficult life can be sometimes. Wow. So the near-death phenomena is not necessarily a group you want to join. Right now, it's gotten a huge shot in the arm because Eben Alexander, who's a Harvard neurosurgeon, came out with his book, Proof of Heaven. Okay? Yeah. So, because he comes from Harvard, all the bells and whistles are there, and it's being rejuvenated, so to speak. The year before, Mary Neal Walsh came out with To Heaven and Back, another MD. The reality is, there have been these cutting-edge MDs, other researchers too, who have been in this field and haven't gotten near the credit because of the way things are today, as Alan showed in his work back to 1906. So I'm just going to throw out a few here. George Ritchie, who wrote Return from Tomorrow, published in the 70s. His experience hugely influenced Raymond Moody writing Life After Life. A cardiologist who was a total skeptic, Maurice Rawlings, wrote To Hell and Back, published in 1993. 1890 to 1920, 30 Years Among the Dead. Carl Wickman was a surgeon, psychoanalyst, biblical scholar. His wife was a medium. Devoted 30 years of this kind of work. So they're out there, and like we're all saying here, it's up to us to do the research and carry the torch and get out there and do our work. Because we're part of this. We all have souls. So, we're going to take a quick break here, about 10 minutes.
Can I have my pictures back? We haven't even seen them all here. I keep it moving.
So we go to the bathrooms are in the back, and then we'll get back real quick here so that we can do question and answer. To the panelists, can't wait to go to the bathroom.
Okay, hold your... Have a seat.
Can everyone get their seats? Can everyone take their seats? Bill's the guy that you probably want to chat.
Talk to him.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Well, we're still, Alan's probably still coming, so. And Alan and PMH. There's Alan.
Okay.
I'll give that back to you if you need it.
Okay. So you don't need this? You don't want to throw this around you? Okay. Okay, so for those of us who are still here, I know that always happens on a break. That's the only problem if you don't. Okay, so for those who are still here, which you got about a third of the third of the audience here. We're going to go to question and answer. And they all have their books for sale, but let's try and do the question and answer right now because they're all still here. And hopefully some people's minds have been pushed to ask a question. One more thing about Eben Alexander through IONS. He's going to be speaking at Sophia in July, Sophia University, formerly Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And again, John Spar would have plenty of information on that, so you can talk to John. So who wants to be first? Who wants to break the ice here? I know you do, John. Come on. Okay, out of way. You brave soul, you.
I would just like to know where in Santa Cruz I can get involved with this.
Okay, call me.
Okay.
Or you can go also on the website. It's farmvetco.org.
Repeat her question.
To get involved with Farmer Veterans Coalition, the website, the new website is farmvetco.org. Farmvetco, one word.org. And then you can also check farmnotarms.org. Okay?
Is there a building in Santa Cruz?
They are all over the place. It doesn't quite work like you probably picture it, but check the site, I'll give you an idea, okay? It's quite interesting. Thank you.
Okay, who else? Come on now, the ice has been broken. All right.
Question on how many people in this room have had a near-death experience?
Question.
Besides the groups.
Question.
How many have had two? Three, going for three.
Okay, here you go.
So if of the people who die and return, about 30% have memory of what happened while they were in the other side, what theories or explanations do we have of the 70% who do not remember? I have a friend personally who died and just said there was nothing. He's here.
In the clinical experiment, in the clinical situation, it's 12 to 21%. It's not 30. It's 12 to 21. Of course, it depends on whose study you're reading, but generally speaking, 12 to 21% of people who are in a clinical situation where they die will have a near-death experience. The others don't. So why don't they? Nobody knows. The only thing I can offer you is that those people who do die and come back, it changes their life and lifelong changes, they say almost to a person, I got what I needed. Now there's a clue there. I got what I needed. So maybe it has something to do with the soul. Maybe it has something to do with what was needed at that time in their life. We can't say for sure.
You have a thought there, Alan? No? Okay. Lorraine.
Thank you. This question's for Alan. You mentioned in your talk about trying to convince people about life after death and that it's very difficult to do because of people's fear. Fear.
What are those fears?
What are they afraid of?
Many of the people who are skeptical of life after death, they may have had a religious upbringing and they've become an atheist. They no longer believe in a God. And they've set that aside along with the Easter Bunny and everything else. And but they didn't clear up a couple of other things. When they were a little child and told about God and the Easter Bunny, they were also told about hell, a place of punishment in the afterlife. And when they became an atheist and got rid of the idea of God, they forgot to get rid of this other belief they picked up at age 2, that they're unconscious that they have. And so they can't have an afterlife, because if there is one, then there's probably a God, or there might be a God, in which case then there's a hell, and they've got hell to pay, and they're determined that there can't be an afterlife. Now that's the kind of subconscious, unconscious fears that drive these people. So no matter how good your proof is, they can't believe it. If you can get rid of that fear, then they would listen to your data, and they'd look at it and say, oh my. But until they can overcome that fear that's their motivation, they're not going to hear you. And so you're wasting your breath trying to convince them of anything. Okay? Now that's what I'm trying to say there.
And that fear exists everywhere, particularly in academia, because you have to remember there will be a paradigm shift if that was to occur. If you look at the UFO field, one time I was speaking about it, I brought up Maurice Chatelain, 3 PhDs, okay, 11 patents with NASA. He was the communication engineer for the Apollo flights. And when I showed it to these group of skeptics, they said, well, maybe he was lying. You got to go through this time. Gordon Cooper, out of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, he was #1. The movie, The Right Stuff, focused on Cooper. Handshake from Kennedy, longest manned flight around the Earth. He openly talked on public television one time about his UFO experience. He never went to the moon. He was our #1 astronaut because he spoke about it prior to even going on television about it. So it forces people to have their whole belief system shift.
I wanted to add this one thing. If they would look into it deep enough, they'd discover that we don't believe there is any retribution at all. But they don't look in deep enough. They just totally categorically disallow it. And they don't realize that there's an afterlife, but it doesn't involve retribution. There's karma. You can go into an afterlife and maybe you're in a place and you're not having a good experience. There's dark near-death experiences. But we don't believe in retribution. And if these skeptics would realize that, they'd suddenly say, well, are you sure? There is no retribution? And then their fear of hell that they were taught at 2 years old would disappear. But until they are willing to look at the data, it's not going to happen.
Hi, I'm wondering, since you've all had after-death experiences, if now you can travel out of body at night and go to other dimensions.
Sure.
Did you want to say anything more than?
I want to say something.
Yeah, well, where do you go? What do you that was, I used to teach people how to do astral traveling, but long before I ever died. It became a very handy tool that I used in my work. As I used to work for the Idaho Department of Commerce and Development in the Capitol building in Boise, Idaho. And for instance, my senior editor came to me one day and she said she wanted an article on Grand Targhee Ski Resort by 5 o'clock that day. I'd never been in eastern Idaho. Called up the state library, they didn't have a thing on Grand Targhee. All she gave me was a little pamphlet. So I went into my office, told my secretary to hold all my calls, sat down at my desk and did what I called zapping the soul out of the body. Left my body, went over to Grand Targhee, skied the whole place. Walked around, saw the signs, walked up and down the road, smelled the smells, really took in Grand Targhee. Then came back, activated my body, grabbed a bunch of paper, put it in the typewriter, and typed out everything I saw, smelled, or thought, or felt while I was there. used that as my research to write the article At the Base of Heaven. It was published in Incredible Idaho magazine. The coup de grace came after it was published. The owner of Grand Targhee went to my boss, the senior editor, and told her that the next time I come up there, my skiing would be on the house. So my senior editor came to tell me this wonderful offer, and it was all I could do to keep from saying to her, should I bring my body or not? You know, so to me, out-of-body trips are no big deal. I've taught hundreds of people how to do it. I can take them anytime I want to take them. But why bother? My job is here. I'm a very practical person. I'm not going to flip out on this stuff unless there's a reason. Like I did back with Grand Targhee. There was a reason. I needed to, you know, meet my deadline.
To answer your question, I
yeah.
want to say yes, it's easier after you've done it once. That's the question you have. It's much easier. And that's why we all end up having multiple experiences out of body.
Within all these experiences of people having near-death experiences like yourselves and people in the public, within a vision of the future that you guys saw, within the message improving our dimension, our world to save it, within the theories of all those like indigo children, and which they seem to be born into this world with all those already knowledge, what would you be your guys' comment into that?
First thing, take all of these labels, indigo, crystal, starseed, cosmic, psychic, toss them. Then take all the characteristics those labels were supposedly to describe, bunch them together, and you have the new kids, the new pattern. It's the pattern, if you want to get esoteric, it's the pattern of the fifth root race. And that is now coming into ascension. That is to say, fulfillment. And it's global. I wrote a book about it called Children of the Fifth World. It has now covered land masses and population groups, so it's now global. And a lot of research on that. As far as predictions, Ken Ring did a big study on this. And he found that timing, forget timing, timing doesn't work. They all seem to have, or many seem to have a sense of what's coming, but the timing of that has thus far proved to be not exact at all.
Anybody else?
This is for PMH. I think you studied children, right, that had near-death experiences. So did you get their descriptions when they were children or when they were adults reflecting? Oh.
Whatever. Yeah. Got her as an adult, but as a child. Yeah, I did a lot with children, meaning little ones, and teenagers, and when they were young adults, and when they were older adults. I went the full span so that I could see what difference it might have made in their lives. So I did the full span. And it's because of my work with child experiencers of near-death states that I ever tackled the new children and what's currently going on now in the way of evolution and the change in genetics that's happening in the human family. So that was my inspiration to write Children of the Fifth World. But you'll find when you are working with children, they do not integrate or deal with a near-death experience like an adult does. Very different pattern, very different tracking. So if any of you had an experience as a child, please get the book, The New Children and Near-Death Experiences, because it'll be your story, and you'll find that you really don't quite match the pattern that adults do, and of course you don't. A child thinks differently, and they track differently. Yeah, what else did you ask? Have I covered it? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, a thought about Alan's point that's really important. Okay, I'll go right to you. We're raised in a Judeo-Christian model, okay? And what's behind that Judeo-Christian model? Jesus died for our sins, so we don't have to be responsible anymore. Think about that. Jesus died for our sins. Now, I wear this. People say, well, why do you wear it? Why do you still wear it? Because for me, he was a way shower. Somebody I aspire that path for myself. Somebody that I look at and say, wow. So the reality is, if reincarnation is the process, that means I've got to take accountability for my own actions. That's where all that fear comes from. That's where all that resistance comes from. Now think about a secure person. We aren't concerned about other people's judgments. Watch how many people are so afraid of what everybody else thinks. Or I hear it all the time in psychology. You can't be judgmental, you can't be judgmental. That's because people have been dumped on so much. They're worried about that judgment. All right? But it's clear, even if we use the Bible, judge not, lest we be judged by how we judge. So I don't say that person's a bad so-and-so and son of a... But at the same time, judge the tree by the fruit it's bearing. Are people's lives reflecting it? When they do, we know we're onto something.
Ellen, I'm just wondering, after you had your experience, what was your message you were given to put your life back on track? Not that it was off track, but what was
the message I was given?
If there was one.
That I needed to go back. I mean, I was there and I was just happy as could be, and I got the message that, okay, a little while and you can come back here. Just a little while and you can come back. That was 44 years ago. And so the message was your business isn't done there, and so you go back and you'll find out what it is. And I had to work through all kinds of things. It took me a long time. Again, I couldn't talk to people in those days. There was nothing going on. You couldn't speak about it. And it took me a while to discover that Moody had written his book and that people were talking about it and it was something to do. And then I began to do my research, and then I joined the International Association for Near-Death Studies as a professional member and began to read all the stuff coming through in their journals. And then I began to start to write. And I think I began the writing, putting it down finally into a book, started in 2004. That's when I really got the vision. I've got to put this in. And then you've got all the stuff. How do you to just put this little thing together? You know, there's rooms full of stuff, and as you know, she knows about it. And you have to weed out what you're not going to say, because you have to get clear to the point, and you have to look at a lot of what the questions people have and the answers they need, not the ones I want to tell. And that was hard to narrow it down. That's why in my lecture I didn't talk about my experience. You've heard of lots of experiences you can read. She's got tons of them in the book that you can read about that are out there.
I understand.
You don't, and I wanted to get down to what do you need? What do I want to give you? Not what do I want to say? So that message takes a long time, as she'll tell you. You have a brain shift, and it takes a while to get the brain back together. And it took me 6 months before I could actually think again. The way you think when you're in a physics class and you get this idea. That took 6 months. And she talks about she couldn't figure out how to eat. What am I doing? You know, all of this is very real for all of us. And we all hear each other and we start to cry hearing the other one talk, because it's so real.
Thank you very much.
Please know that
Who's
timing for a soul is not the same as timing for our personality. So what we call time does not apply on the other side.
Doesn't exist over there.
Yeah, so when you get these predictions or sense of the future, there's this timing factor. So a lot of these predictions may have some substance to them, but be careful of the timing.
Discussing and thinking about the new physics that's occurring nowadays. I don't know if it's on.
Yeah.
Okay. What we've been studying in FMBR has to do with the ether and the movements of the ether. And I love the two vortexes that you saw, because that's what really everything is motion. At least it's, the new theories are stating that. And they do come in terms of the vortexes, and then they eventually become a torus, and they self-reference. And everything is of this nature, whether it be the table or anything else in the fields that they form. So hearing you talk about that was, and looking at the picture, it just makes everything so real with regard to that.
I felt that I was in the throat of a giant torus.
Yeah, and the torus.
And a torus within a torus.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah, a torus within a torus.
Well, the torus centers the referencing portion. Yeah. So.
It sounds like you each got messages of what your mission was in this lifetime. Did you get messages of what the general public, such as people like ourselves, should be striving for or doing or changing?
I think the main message that I got was that we're all connected, that we're all one, and all there is love. You know, that people think that there's fear, but all there is love, and that we need to come back to that oneness and that sacredness of everything being sacred and one.
We are non-local. I am her and she is me. And I am you. And you are me. We are non-local. We are one. And that's what Schrodinger's saying. We are one. There is no separation. Space, the whole idea of movement even, is all a construct. Time is a construct. It's just our way of seeing it. It doesn't really exist. It's an illusion. Let's get Buddhist here. Everything's an illusion. We're just going through suffering here. Okay. What's that? Unless we're not.
So you were free to all come from source and return to source?
Absolutely. We are all, if you want to call it source. I like to call it the force, you know. May the force be with you, all that. I love Star Wars type of way of saying it, you know, because that's how it is. And our mission here that we all discover, and we all have the same mission, really, when we look at it, is to be one, to understand that we are not separate. Whatever hurts you hurts me. We individuate. I still haven't figured out how we can not be one soul and individuate the way we do. But we individuate in the afterlife as well. Okay? Maybe we, God, is having a lot of fun experiences as all these different individuals, okay? And learning a whole lot, and they're really enjoying the heck out of it. I'm not sure how that works. I would love to be able to explain it in physics. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? And I think we're going there.
I just would like to say another thing. Everything that we think, do, has an impact. We are one, but consciousness is also based on our actions, our thoughts, our words. And that's where we come, yes. That's how. But it's not that simple.
Okay, this is dealing with dark matter. And those of you that spoke about the bodies being like dark matter, that part interested me very much because recently in astronomy, they've come to accept that there might be or there is such a thing as dark matter, and whereas, I know, about 10 to 20 years ago, you didn't even say that word in public if you were an astronomer. You'd get laughed at, and then it became an accepted concept. So is there any relationship to what you experienced to the current concept in astronomy?
I believe that the afterlife, the place we go, exists in that dark energy, and that the bodies that we form on the other side, ethereal bodies, exist in that dark matter. Okay? And in quantum physics we have 8 dimensions we've not discerned yet. And you can think, okay, the 5th dimension, okay, there we go. Where are we going? You know, imagine. It's a place that exists. If you've seen Fringe, they have that other world over there. That's what the afterlife is. It's another dimension. And it exists in dark energy. We can currently discern 4% of the universe, just the light energy. That's all we can actually discern. We can mathematically show you that the rest of it's there. The dark energy and the dark matter exists, but that's 96% of the universe we can't even discern, identify, touch, spot, see. We cannot discern it, but we know it's there mathematically. And that's an awful lot of territory, 96%, for a whole lot of worlds at different levels, different spheres, if you want to call them spheres as the spiritualists do, different levels out there. All we know in our near-death experience is that it's real. And what's beyond there we don't know, but I think we're going to nail it one of these days soon. We're sure working in that direction.
Well, let's see here. You all have had an experience that changed your own life, changed the direction of your life, and gave you a purpose. Now, I don't know if that was true for everybody who goes on the other side. It also changed, I would think, your physical body. In other words, we're connecting. And such a change within you should change you. And that should be capable of being seen and measured and looked at. And I think you were...
That's why I passed out my photos.
But you could, I saw your photos, it shows that. But that's not quite the same. I'm going to go down another level into the science that could be done with that.
One of the problems is that when you have the near-death experience, you didn't get measured before you went. So everything you measured is going to be after you came back. So you're not going to see the change. We can talk about the change. We know that it's there, but your measurements are going to be difficult because you don't know you're going in. So you don't take a physical before you go and then a physical after you come back and see what the differences are. They're real.
But there are brain patterns too that must change.
I'm sure there are the brain shift. Read a PMH Atwater, very clear on the brain shift.
In near-death experiences, the rest of the story. I also go into dark matter and dark energy.
So, but there's a definite change in your whole thinking process. And this is what I say, your brain is so addled that it takes 6 months to just begin to put it all back together. This is what she was describing in her.
So it's a reprogramming of your brain.
Yeah, to reprogram everything.
Now, there are other ways what other ways do you think are capable of doing the same without going through the near death?
Absolutely. That's also in my book.
I'm hoping that...
I read all your books, I read some.
So near-death experience is the rest of the story.
I'm hoping Alexander will go into this. He's a neurosurgeon and he's experienced this, and as he now begins to read the rest of the literature, he wanted to write his book without reading anything else. After he gets into the rest of it, maybe he'll come and just start to describe that, because he has the credentials to tell us how the brain reconstructs. We'll see what he does.
That's the next range of science, I think, that will cover this area.
And we're making progress by leaps and bounds, really, as compared to what we were doing 30 years ago.
Well, you could have also follow and see if at least the way patterns coherent, for instance. that would be interesting because that's not the case for the majority of the population. Things like that, things that the brain function that most people don't have. If there is a repetitive scientific data, then it would make sense.
The biggest problem we have is in the neuroscience industry. Their model has no consciousness outside the wet brain. And until we can get that going, all the studies they're doing seem to, they're so physical, I can't stand it, because the mind is not physical. And yet all of our studies of the mind going on in the United States at this time and most of the world involve the physical brain. And they're trying to make the physical brain have emotions. Well, I'm not sure that it does. I think the mind has emotions, the heart has emotions, and the physical brain, there has to be a paradigm shift before we're going to get some of the stuff you want to talk about there. And we need to bring that paradigm shift about.
There's a movie, actually, a very little known movie called Dark Matter that Meryl Streep agreed to star in. That she's actually not the star, she's secondary. It's with a lot of unknown actors. And it's excellent as far as watching the competitiveness of the scientists who try and keep this one young man who's discovered a reality that they don't want to deal with. And it turns into a spiritual ending by things like authenticity and care and the things that had to come through, but not by those who opposed it. So I'm not going to say any more than that, but rent that movie. It's very well done. Dark Matter. And that other thought you had, Alan. I lost it.
Actually, I had another question earlier. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I had another question earlier, and it has to do with unity. And I understand the concept of unity because I meditate, but I still have this question, which is in this world, as we are incarnated, they are ascending masters in one hand, and then they are crazy haters on the other. And how can I be responsible for these people? That's what I want to know.
Be responsible for the bad guys?
Yeah. How come I would be responsible for them? Because I'm doing my best to be good.
I don't have a good answer. I have to say that I'm waiting for some.
We're all one, though, right? Never like that for we got here.
I don't have a good answer for that. I am currently going to study evil and all the thoughts of evil up until this point. Yeah, I've got a lecture series coming in the mail. Because I want to figure that out, the questions you're asking. And I come back in a couple of weeks.
Anybody have a place to go to give you some thought on that matter? Conversations with God, I think it's book 1 or book 2, Neil Donald Walsh. There's a chapter called Hitler Went to Heaven. Look that up, and that may give you some food for thought on that.
Teacher. I would like to say one thing. Nothing came up on the questions part of today is paranormal. After near-death experiences, mainly. I would like to find someone who can explain some of it to me. Because this has become a regular way of life. And there are some dark side to it, and there are some healing side to it. And my son has been visiting since he died. That's how I found my last grandson. I had 3 dreams when Patrick came to me, and I don't dream of him much. It was more than a dream. He was so vivid. And the only thing he said to me was, "Mom, my son." And he vanished. So the next day I called my grandson and a granddaughter. And everybody was fine. So the day after that, I had another dream. The same message, "Mom, my son." And I started to get annoyed with it. You know, he's okay. I'm a grandma here. I can't do everything.
So the third dream was on Patrick's anniversary of death. And this time Patrick was kind of mad at me. And he said, "Mom, my son." Okay. Well, I understood then that something was going wrong, something was not right. The same day, I got a phone call, young man's voice. He was sobbing, crying, he couldn't speak clearly. And he just went on saying, "Oh, I just found you. You probably don't want to talk to me now." And I said, wait, are you Junior? My other grandson. And he said, no, I'm not Junior, but I'm your grandson anyway, and you never met me, and you probably don't want to talk to me. I said, hold it, repeat that slowly for me, please. And he explained a little slower that his mother just told him he turned 18, that his father was my son. He never met him. And his mother was Monique, which I remember very well. And now he's such a sweetheart. He's 20, he just turned 21. Okay? A dream. My son warned me, it was a dream. But on the other hand, when I lost the house, I had another dream with him. I only saw his hand and his knock on a door, and the door was the door that we had in France on the old house. And he was knocking on that door. There was a big chain and a lock. And he was saying to me, "Mom, pay attention." The next day, the house was auctioned. And we were in the process of having a short sale. Communication.
Was real.
Yeah. It just, and there is so much more. I had some dark entity come in, trying to kill me, literally. That was before he was shot. And I get asthma from this, and I get really a lot of side effects. Just before I left the house in Tracy, the same entity came back, and I recognized the feel of it, everything about it. And the only thing that came out of me, I know what it was. I woke up and I said, "Be gone. Just be good. If you're not from God, be gone." And it just stopped. But what was that? Electricity. I walk under a chandelier, the light bulb explode. The other day, the shower exploded on me. Exploded, not broke, just exploded. An entity came the next day. It showed behind the door initials, and I thought it was the steam, so I went like this on the door. It was not the steam, it was on the other side. I ran off on my bed, took a camera, and took a picture of it. What is that all about? I want to find somebody who's capable to explain this to me.
Well, this is what he was asking. Is there changes that can be measured? Exactly. And there's a great deal of them.
Exactly.
But we have to have a measurement before the experience.
That's not all.
To make
there
a
are
comparison.
much more things that have happened, including a microwave.
But that's normal.
Oh, watch, yeah.
That's electrical sensitivity.
No, I shoot the electricity to the microwave, not the other way around.
Same deal. Same deal, it's still electrical sensitivity. I brought down all kinds of grids.
My first grandson won't kiss me.
Yeah.
I zapped him.
Yeah, serious. I understand that.
The computer is your karma.
I just wanted to point out this because it's become a way of life. And sometimes I just don't want to touch my car because I get zapped.
Don't touch my electrical things.
I realized touching a wall where there is no outlet and it's being zapped.
Right.
You could imagine it.
Honey, between 72 to 75% of all near-death experiencers return with electrical sensitivity. It's because your electromagnetic field changed.
Yeah, but that's a lot.
I know it's a lot.
Is there anything that someone can do to help ground themselves or dissipate the energy?
Yeah, I think there is. But I don't know that you dissipate all of it.
Well, yeah.
Certainly prayer is part of it. Some near-death experiencers now wear watches that are solar powered instead of battery. That seems to help. If I use a computer, I always have amber around the computer because amber will transmute the blue light and the radiation that makes it possible. I've learned to recognize when these feelings are beginning to start, electrical sensitivity is beginning to start. So I'll either be very careful of what I'm doing, or I'll go into prayer immediately and take over. It's only when I forget to do that that I have this blow-ups. Did you stop to realize all the electrical problems that they were having in this room tonight? Did you stop to notice that? It's electrical sensitivity. We're here.
I blame it on other people.
No, it's the four of us.
This is for Mr. Hugenot. Kind of going back to the science part that you said you were interested in, and Schrodinger. Quantum mechanics also is interesting to me. It seems like if what we're talking about here, the near-death experience and the other side and what dark energy is made out of, it's pretty clear to me anyway that it seems like the quantum theory has to hold true. It has to be in operation for our whole universe. And my question is, I know there's a lot of crazy things about it, but to you, what's the most shocking, strange thing about quantum theory that you know?
The strangest thing?
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things about it. I was wondering what you thought was the most interesting or shocking, actually, thing to you.
Well, the most interesting thing is Even Walker's theories on the hidden variables and the consciousness. There's two channels of consciousness. And when the two channels get together in a holographic projection, then you have the hidden variables in and you have the precipitate the state vector. His theories, I think that's the most interesting thing, is Evan, E-V-A-N Walker. So look up his books, and he'll talk about the consciousness channel, and let's see in my mind at the moment what the other channel is. There's two channels anyway, and I'll call them the information channel and the will channel. There it is, the information channel and the will channel. The will channel wants to do something, but the information channel has got so many things going on in it, especially with all our cell phones and music and everything, that we can't get it together to make both transmissions, to create both sides of the hologram. Once we do it, then we'll precipitate whatever we want in matter. That's the most interesting corner.
Okay, so my question is for anybody who could best answer it. If there is no hell, where do the dark entities come from? Maybe you guys know, and how come people have hellish near-death experiences?
The dark. I don't know that they're hellish.
Well, that's what they're called.
It's energy.
I'm sorry, but I'm starting to fade. I really am, so I apologize. As a researcher, I can say there is a hell and there is a heaven. They're both real, and people go there. So let's skip over that one. If you want to know more about heaven and hell, of course, I've got to know my books. What I discovered in my research is that there is a dynamic on the other side, sort of like a layer cake. There's many, many different layers and levels. What we call the lower levels are a heavier, slower energy. The higher levels are a faster, lighter energy. But the whole dynamic is it's open-ended. There is no bottom and there is no top.
So nobody's going to rot in hell, and nobody's going to spend forever plucking a harp on a cloud. And the whole dynamic seems to be moved and fed by choice.
It's perceptive.
That it is the most incredible dynamic that exists on the other side. Talk about fair. And you go to wherever it is you resonate. That's the energy that pulls you there. You go to wherever it is you resonate. You will not stay there. You'll eventually move. It depends on you. So that the idea of hell, you're going to come right back out of that eventually. The idea of heaven, you're going to come back out of that eventually too. Where else do you go? Nobody knows for sure. There are other dimensions in the abstract, in the abstractions, abstract worlds that are above and beyond that. Nobody can really define that. Some people think they can, but they can't. So this dynamic is something that's very active. So that's heaven and hell. When you're talking about dark entities, you're talking about this side. You're talking about different types of individuals that have used their energy in different kinds of ways. Some people spend a lot of time in anger or a lot of time in fear. Guess what that's going to create? It's going to create some pretty heavy thought forms. If you're going to spend a lot of time, well, let's say you're born with a different brain, then of course you're going to think differently. Some people come in violent. Yes, they do. And they're going to follow that track. Maybe the soul decided on the other side that was good for them in this lifetime. Maybe they just twisted on their own. But you do have the presence of dark energies because of dark thoughts, dark feelings. Those all manifest. They can twist an individual. Certainly you can turn that around. We've got rescue people, rescue work. There's different ways of turning that around. So, yeah, okay, bye.
The darkness is a perceptual problem that has to do with karma. Okay?
Sometimes, yes.
It's a karmic thing. You move on. And everything that she said there. Yeah. We have a responsibility to have good thoughts. And if we don't, then we'll suffer the consequences.
See you all in a month.